very quickly, what I'm going to talk about this afternoon is a very quick history of glass, but from the point of view of glass which is restored. Glass is a material which has existed in the form that we recognise it, more or less for the last 2,000 years, slightly more than 2,000 years. I'm talking about objects that you use, things you drink from, things you put flowers in, and so on and so forth. Now, just to get everything into a picture, I've laid the glass out here. This is the glass that is on sale. Everything here is on sale. The stuff we're going to be looking at is not on sale. Everything in here is 19th century. So this is all 19th century form, as you can see there. What you've got here is 18th century. Everything here is 18th century. This lot down here is continental, again 18th century, some of it borderline 19th century, but basically it's 18th century continental, German, Bohemian, French. Over here we've got a mixture of 20th century, late 19th century, lots and lots of champagne glasses. This lot, ignore the moment because we'll be looking at those shortly. Everything else is either 19th century, most of the coloured glass is 19th century, and the rest of it is late 19th century or 20th century. So 19th century, 18th century, 20th century, and some part of 19th century. That fits in the stuff that you can see in front of you. Now here you've got a shelf full of glass which is restored. The two objects have not been restored. That one and that one. I'll point those out to you straight away. This is a piece of Roman glass. It's just a little vial. It's not a tear glass. They're called tear glasses. That's a load of rubbish. It's just a little thing for serving something, or oil or whatever. It's broken around the top. This sort of glass is really quite fragile. It's very difficult to restore. It can be restored, but it's very expensive to do. So this is what we would say is unrestored. This too is unrestorable. This is a glass from the very end of the 17th century and the beginning of the 18th century. It's what is known in France as un verre malade, a sick glass. We call it crystal. What's happened? This is made of soda metal. There's soda metal crystal. Crystal glass was created by a team working under a man called Ravenscroft in about 1670, and English glass was essentially that from then on, and it was the most important glass for a little while. This was soda metal, and soda metal is unstable, and if you're unlucky it'll turn up looking like that, so it's pretty horrible to use, but you can't do anything about it. You can't reverse it, it's impossible. So that's an unrestorable glass. Now the rest of it, everything you can see there has been restored, either in the 19th century or the 20th century, different periods in the 20th century. And what I would like you to do, anybody who is prepared to volunteer, because if you don't volunteer I'll just pick on somebody, choose one of those glasses, and I'm going to put it on there, then we'll talk about it. So who would like to choose something? Go on then, anyone you like that really appeals to you. That one at the back. Okay, right. So we've got the one at the back. I'm not going to say anything yet. Just put it on the table. Okay. Number one. Who'd like to choose number two? Come on, somebody be brave. The little one. That one. Okay. Right. Okay, we've got number two. Somebody else?
Go on, I'll pick my favourite ones. The one that no one's.
One of them.
One of them. Love that.
Yeah. Okay, we now have three. One more, please. Who would like to come? One more person. One of them. Okay. Right. Well, that's an interesting selection we're starting with. The next question, which of these do you think is the earliest glass? One of them is earlier than the other. Which is the earliest one?
Maybe the smallest one?
The smallest one?
Yeah.
No. This is a glass from about 1750, 1760. But it's an interesting glass, so we'll start with that one. Have a look at it. What can you tell me about it? It's small, yeah. Yeah. Look at the colour of that, look at the colour of that.
Yeah.
Is it the same?
No.
Yeah. Why do you think that would be?
Use it.
It's a possibility. Any other suggestions? Have a look at it. No? This actually does not belong to this. This is off another glass. It's a totally different colour, it's a totally different form, it's a completely different glass. This was made about 50 years after this. But the stem of this broke, so somebody had the bright idea of taking that and welding it onto the top. And that's one form of restoration. And they were very clever, because what they did, they created another knob. So when you look at it, you think it's a complete glass with two interesting different knobs. In actual fact, it's a restored glass. And it was restored, why? Because somebody liked it. And they paid a fortune to have that done. It would have been more expensive to have it restored than to actually buy the original glass. And the original glass was expensive. Glass was only, like this, was only used by rich people. Poor people like us didn't use glass, basically until the end of the 19th century. Or the invention, in fact, slightly earlier, of press glass. But it was cheap enough for ordinary people. Rich people, this sort of thing, when this was made, was owned by about 10% of the population. And that, in reality, it wasn't. It was owned by 5% of the population, because 5% of the population was women. And women in Britain didn't own anything. Right? So this was a rich man's toy, which he paid a lot to have restored. That's one form of restoration, welding. There's actually there's a couple of other glasses in there that have been welded. This one, this is later. It's an early 20th century glass, or late 19th century. This is the original glass, and it's welded at the bottom. Not so well done as the other one, but that belongs to that. But originally the glass was about that much longer. So there we've got another welded glass. There's another one that's in there that's welded. Can anybody guess which one it is? It's a bit difficult to see from that distance. It's this one. And again, the person who did it, and this foot does belong to the glass. This is a glass from the end of the 18th century, and it's been welded there. So now we've got a very important form of restoration that most people don't even know exists. Welding the stem back together again when it's been broken. Very costly process, and a dangerous process because the glass could break completely, reheating it. So, welding, that's one way of doing it. Okay, let's go back to these. Look at that. What date do you think that is? It's slightly earlier than the other one. Very, very slightly. It's probably about 1740. But this is a totally different form of restoration. We're not allowed to use this today. It's lead. It's a lead band which has been put on to hold it together. This was a great big sweetmeat dish that stood on the table with also probably had grapes and things draping out of it. And it broke, so they got somebody to put this quite ugly circle of lead on. The process of doing it is really clever. So now we have another way of joining them together by using a piece of metal. There's another one, excuse me, there's another one that uses the same process. This is an earlier glass. Excuse me. This is probably 17th century. And they've used some form of brass alloy to do exactly the same job. This was a valuable glass. Somebody wanted to keep it, so they got this put on. Trouble is, it's not terribly good because it rocks a little bit. But it's the same process. So now we've got another process, a piece of metal wrapped around the glass to hold it together. Or not really hold it together with this one. This came out of quite a famous collection. It belonged to a man called Keith Kelsall. He wrote about sweetmeat dishes and taxes. Good book. Okay, so we've now got joining them together with metal. This one, the first one that was chosen, no, it wasn't the first. It was the first one. Anybody any idea what date this is? Beautiful glass. You're getting near. It's actually the very beginning of the 17th century. It could be. There are glasses like this at the end of the 16th century, but really this is the 17th century. Beautiful glass. I bought this in a group of glasses in Paris. It was so damaged that it wasn't worth including in the catalogue. It was just thrown into a group. When I bought this, it had a great big hole in the side. Literally, there, the whole of that side was destroyed. There was nothing there. It was just a hole. So I took it home. I've collected restored glass for years. I thought, I'm going to try and get this restored. It cost me £120 to have this restored. But I have a lady who is a ceramics restorer, and she does a little bit of glass restoration with plastic. And she does this for the museums, the big museums. She actually created the glass again. And when you have a chance to come and look at it more closely, you will see all that bit there has been filled with plastic, and she's recreated all the ribs. It's an amazing piece of restoration. Absolutely beautiful restoration of a 17th century glass. A really quite important glass. It's mine. It's never going to be for sale while I'm alive. My daughters probably will sell it eventually. I don't know what we'll get. I won't be careful. Okay, so we come to the last one that's been selected. There are other things as well, but this one is probably one of the best pieces of restoration I've ever seen. It's somebody's medicine glass. It's marked for measurements on it. And it's got this huge, thick base. It has absolutely nothing to do with the glass. The foot broke off. Any idea what that is? No. It's a stopper of a decanter. Very heavy stopper of a decanter. But look how it's been done. Who chose it? I don't remember who chose it. Mike was got it. Right, have a look. Who'd like to have a look? You have a look. How's that been put together? Anybody, have a look. What do you think it's been done to? It is a most amazing piece of restoration.
That's on wire.
Not barbed wire.
No, by wire. Like, I don't know.
It's thread.
Ah.
It's cotton thread. Thick cotton thread. Now you have to imagine the scene. It can't possibly happen in the 21st century because it's against the law. The thing gets broken, and the man says to his wife, "Look at that! You've broken that damn glass that we can use. Right, you can restore it. You're good with a needle." She sewed it back on. They got a stopper, and she sewed the foot on. That is so. It's the only one I've ever seen like that. It's an amazing piece of restoration. Okay, so those have been chosen, but we missed out some other ways of doing it. I'm amazed nobody's chosen this one. This looks good from a distance, but when you look at it properly, it's been stapled together. There are metal staples driven into that, which are holding it together. And each one of those staples cost £6. So this was a valued piece. It's a lovely piece. It's probably made in France between 1820 and 1830. Charles X. Beautiful. They may have re-gilded the top, I'm not sure. But it's a fabulous glass. And it would have had a bowl to go with it. By the time they finished, you could use it, even though it was shattered. Somebody dropped it and really cracked it up. So, joining together with staples. That one's been joined together with staples, but they're slightly different. These have been driven through both sides and then flattened. Imagine, you've got to drill the glass in the first place, and then you've got to hit it with something. And this is glass. Glass breaks. That's the reason you're doing this in the first place. So we now have staples joining the thing together. There's another example. This is the most common form of restoration you'll see. This was a lovely Jacobite glass. This is a real Jacobite glass, Jacobite engraving. But it got chipped on the top. So they sent it to a restorer who just took the top off. It's completely flat. Completely ruined as a glass. It's worthless. It's a tragedy because it could have been restored properly. My restorer could have restored it properly, sadly died of COVID at the age of 39. He was brilliant. He could have restored that and it would have been a good glass. But too late. One other form of restoration we haven't talked about, that's gluing. Date? Think Spanish Armada. 1588. This is about 1588. This is a little beaker from Northern Europe which has been dropped, has cracked in various places, and probably about 1900 or thereabout, 1920, it was glued together. The glue is thick, it's discoloured, it doesn't look very good, and they couldn't do anything about the ribs that got broken. But that's a glued together restoration. There's another one that's been glued together in there. That's been glued together. When I got that, I bought a jug which had a big crack in it for £5. And when I took it out of the sale room, I found something rattling around in the bottom. What on earth's that? I took this bit out. What is a rocket doing in this jug? And then the other bit fell into my hand. I realised it was a taper stick. This is a taper stick from about 1740. Lovely little taper stick. And I contacted a chap called Steve Bradley, who's now down in Cornwall. And I was one of his first clients. And I said, Steve, can you glue this together for me? So he said, yeah, I'll just chop it off there. I said, no, you won't chop anything off because you'll ruin it. You've got to do it for £10 you glued it together. Nobody can see that's been glued. It's not going anywhere while I'm alive. And my daughters have it. It's up to whoever sees it whether they think it's real or not. It'll probably be sold as a perfect piece, and somebody will pay a lot of money for it. But not while I'm alive. It's part of my collection. There is one last thing that we haven't, or that one also, that's stapled. That's actually stapled in metal as well. So you've got two sorts of restoration. And this is a basic form of restoration. This is actually probably the most important glass in here, was. This is engraved with the four continents. This is a Bohemian glass from about 1720. It was a goblet. Somebody broke it, so they just took the foot off, and it became a beaker. And that was a form of restoration, simple form of restoration. I've seen lots and lots of rummers, goblets, which have been turned into beakers. So there you are, you've got all those different forms of restoration that you've seen. Now you can go out and you can build yourself a collection Because all this lot I've got here cost me, remember, one of them cost me £120 to have restored. The whole lot cost me no more than £200 for all those really interesting pieces of glass. So there you are. Go out and find yourself a collection, and I'll start.
Thank you very much.